How do you breathe life into one of Europe's biggest lenders? Let's ask Jean-Pierre Mustier. The Frenchman has led Italy's biggest bank since 2016, and under his leadership, it's posted higher earnings and stronger capital. It's also changing the way it's run, down to making fiat the right of choice instead of luxury cars. Today, on Leaders with Lacqua, we meet Jean-Pierre Mustier, the chief executive of Unicredit. Jean-Pierre Mustier, thank you so much for joining us on Leaders with Lacqua. What does it mean being a banker in 2020?
It means many things. First of all, it means dealing with an environment which is a little bit challenging. It means financing the economy and making sure we support our clients. It means working with our team members in order to change our bank, because we live in a world where the change and the evolutions are very rapid.
But how has it changed since the financial crisis? Is it culture or is it the environment?
It's both, actually, but I think the culture has changed quite a lot as well, because the banks are going through a revolution in terms of digitalization, automation, and also because banks have to change in terms of culture and perception. With the financial crisis, bankers cannot be the same. At Unicredit, we say we do the right thing. That's our principle. And that's very important that we change towards ethics and respect, which are our two values, to do the right thing with our client, with our team members, and of course with all the environment.
But who do you do that for? Is it shareholders, your employees, or your customers?
All of them. First is for clients, because it's important that our clients have a bank which does the right thing with them. For our employees, to retain them and make sure that they give a sense to what they do. And for new employees to join us, basically. And of course for our shareholders, because the shareholders want a bank which acts properly.
But has the culture really changed, or is it just what chief executives tell us?
The culture changed because it goes down slowly, but I think we have really made a change in terms of how we behave, how we interact with the outside, how we interact with our clients and our team members.
Where does that come from? Does it have to be the job of the chief executive to almost give the DNA of the company and then permeate down all the echelons?
Yeah, it comes from the top. You have to lead by example, first of all, and then each members of the team can buy in, and then we make sure that this spreads everywhere.
Do you spend a lot of your time looking at how you can be less risky and how you can, I guess, engage with clients differently, or do you spend more time trying to figure out how you deal with negative rates?
Well, we do spend a fair amount of time to deal with negative rates. It's marginally on top of our agenda. But more seriously, we spend a lot of time about defining how we can do the right things with the outside and with our team members. It's very, very important today. And it's a matter of leading by example. I made some of my colleagues smile when I changed the car policy of the bank. So I have a Fiat Cinquecento red, because that's the color of the bank, like my tie. That was a symbol that, as a bankers, we do the right thing, and we use the car of everybody to work, and a car which is Italian, because we are a European bank, but headquartered in Italy.
So how many other bankers that work for you now show up in a Fiat 500?
Well, they made sure that the contract of the leasing on their car has been slightly extended, so I'm the only one so far. So the culture will change step by step, basically, once their leasing contract is over.
Is that how you win clients? What do the customers ask of banks?
Well, the customers ask the bank to support them. I finish all my client meetings when I see a corporate client, small or big, and I tell them, you can count on us. And I think that's the most important thing. Clients work with us, but they need to know that if they go through a more difficult patch or if they make a big move, they can count on us. And when you see a client, you look them in the eye and say, you can count on us. It means a lot, actually.
But what happened that banks, in certain instances, actually lost their way? That they almost forgot that they were there to finance the economy instead of, making big money elsewhere?
Well, it happens in the past, at a time where maybe the environment, the culture was different. I think today, when you look at the news in politics, in social events, you can see that the banks have to behave properly. And so we are here to finance the economy, small and big client, retail client, high net worth client, small corporate client, and big multinational. And any of them is important for us. There's no difference, basically, and all of them can count on us.
Up next, negative rates and sluggish growth are just some of the problems that European banks have to deal with. But in that environment, how can lenders revive growth and thrive? That discussion next. Jean-Pierre Mustier is a man of experience when it comes to banking. In his over 20 years at Société Générale, he held numerous positions in markets and finance, mostly in Europe, but also in Asia and the US. He's also head of the European Banking Federation. He now brings that wealth of knowledge to his current role as a boss of Unicredit. There, he has to deal with challenges like negative rates, slowing growth, and political issues across the continent. So, what does it take to run a European bank in 2019? Jean-Pierre Mustier is still with me. Is there anything good that could come out of negative rates? They're better for non-performing loans.
Well, it's good for non-performing loans, as you said, because negative rates are, something which help the economy. So, many people criticize the ECB saying negative rates are bad because they basically, negatively impact the top line of a bank. But at the same time, Mr. Draghi pointed out, and he is right, that negative rates help the European economy to stay at a relatively modest rate of growth, but growth, not recession. So the provision of banks were going down. So net, the banks have been having a decent performance. Maybe now, if they are low or negative for longer, it might have a slightly negative impact on banks. We shall see.
Does tiering help?
It does, but it's a marginal help to a certain extent, and I'm sure the ECB can do more tiering. The tiering is calculated at a multiple, and they could increase the multiple, for instance. It's a call to the ECB to increase the multiple.
Mr. Mustier, when you look at how you can deal with negative rates, you've said that you will pass it on to some of your wealthiest clients. Have you had pushback against that?
Well, we have said that we need to pass the impact of negative rates to the client. For us, for instance, in Italy, it's for 0.1% of our client base. So for 99.9% of the clients, there is no impact. You want to make sure that for clients which are more vulnerable, those which have a deposit under the deposit guarantee level, 100,000 euro, you don't push them to change their allocation because that might be dangerous. But for the clients which have more than 1 million euro deposit, that's the one we are targeting, we decided to, on one side, offer them an alternative product, so a money market fund with a target performance of 0+, no commission, so for them it's a shift which is not costing money. And for liquidity in excess of 1 million euro, we discuss with them to see if we can charge them some kind of commission for excess liquidity.
Do you worry that they'd go elsewhere?
Our clients like us, and we make sure that we find an agreement which is mutually beneficial.
You were mentioning the ECB and we were talking about tiering. Well, how would you describe the relationship between European banks and the European Central Bank right now?
It works very well. Everybody says, it's the regulators, how you can deal with them. But in fact, it's a matter with the supervision side, which is where we interact the most. It's a matter of trust. I do interact with the person who is supervising the bank 2 or 3 times a day. We exchange emails, we speak together. So you build trust and you actually can benefit from one each other. So, and the ECB has made a lot of progress on the supervision side. I mean, Mr. Enria, in his latest speech, thanked Mrs. Nui, who created the ECB. But if you look back in 5 years, they did something super good.
Will we see a banking union in our lifetime?
That's a very important question. Actually, we need to define what is a banking union. So a lot of people say we need to complete the banking union. And some people say, but for that we need to have a European deposit insurance scheme. It's a bit technical to me. For me, a banking union means that we have a banking sector which is seen by investors as a European sector. So let's take an example. In the US, when you speak to a US investor, he's going to say, I invest in a US bank. If you speak to the same investor speaking about Europe, what he or she is going to say. Invest in a German bank, an Italian bank, a French bank. Our sector is not seen as a European sector. So for me, the banking union, it's about making sure we have a strong pan-European banking sector. And why? Because we want to attract capital of investors to buy into the bank capital, debt or equity, to give banks the resources to finance the economy. In Europe, banks finance SMEs, which represent 70% of the job. And SMEs don't go to capital market. So it's important that the banks can finance the economy and attract capital.
But if you don't need this deposit scheme, right, which we've seen the Germans be against, then if you create a European champion, you have that bank that could rival the US.
Well, the banking market in Europe is more fragmented than the US. If you look at the combined capitalization of the top 5 European banks, it's smaller than JP Morgan. So, of course, there's a size impact. Why? Because the US market is one single market with no borders, basically, and the same language or the same rule. While in Europe, it's a bit different. We de facto have 27 market or 70 market in the Eurozone. So what is important is to make sure that we have more unification of rules, right, and that the banks look the same when you look at them from the outside. So the deposit scheme is an important parameter, but not sufficient to make sure that the banking sector look completely uniform.
Since taking over at Unicredit, you got rid of quite a lot of assets. What's your vision for what Unicredit will be like in 5 years?
Well, Unicredit is a pan-European bank, very proudly headquartered in Italy. And Unicredit will be, in 5 years, an even stronger pan-European bank. We call ourselves a pan-European winner. So we want to keep developing our activities in the country where we are, to support the retail client on one side, and to support the SMEs to help them grow domestically and to export, and to make our interaction with them completely smoothless on a multi-channel basis. So the client should have a better client experience. It's already very good, but it will be even better and very smooth. For instance, we are putting in place in Italy soon and in other countries paperless branches. Why?
That's digital. No.
It's digital, but it is paperless in a sense that for the client, the interaction will be super smooth. And for bankers, rather than spending time to write and fill in forms, they will be able to spend more time with our clients. So that does improve as well the interaction with them. So the evolution will be to have a much smoother interaction with the clients.
But how different is that interaction going to be? I know, my parents and the parents before them used to want to go and speak to their banker. A lot of the new generation don't want to speak to their bank unless something goes wrong.
But they want to speak to their Unicredit bankers. But more seriously, the interaction needs to be multi-channel. You don't go to a branch today. You do all your transactions on your mobile, on your iPad. But from time to time, for important transactions, you need to speak to somebody and interact. So this is why we have this multi-channel access where you can have a banker actually calling you for a video conference from your iPad, from your computer, or just on your phone, to give you advice. And so the interaction will be much more fluid, but you will still, from time to time, rarely, need to have a human interaction.
Coming up, what do paratrooping and leading a bank have in common? Jean-Pierre Mustier explains next. Being a paratrooper and leading a bank may not sound like they have much in common. But Unicredit's chief executive says they do. They both require leading by example and faith in the ultimate outcome, whether it's a strategic plan or jumping out of an airplane. Jean-Pierre Mustier tells us more. Talk to me about sustainability. Is it just PR talk, or are you really focused on delivering sustainability for the bank?
I think it is an extremely important topic, and you're right to say that there is a little bit of PR talks on some of the actions which are taken. So some people call that now greenwashing, meaning going maybe a little bit too extreme. It is important to communicate about what we can do, and to show that we are transparent, to measure the actions. That's key. What is very important, something I worked on with the European Banking Federation, of which I'm chairman, and the IIF, the International Institute of Finance, is to see how we can measure on the bank balance sheet what you could call the carbon footprint. Because with sustainability, specifically for climate, there's a lot of emotion. And it's normal. We want to protect the earth. So emotions are very important to raise visibility and awareness about the climate issues. But emotion needs to be canalized to a certain extent to make sure we take the right actions. And to take the right actions, you need to measure. You need to understand if something has more impact than something else. And for the banks, they will be absolutely key in this development because they will finance the change. Green development, but also transition. And when you finance an oil company which uses the money for the transition from oil to green, it is actually useful as well. So measuring is something very important.
But this goes back to transparency and actually how you measure it. Are we measuring right? And are we going to have a European or worldwide standard where you measure things the same way?
Well, that's what we're working on. The European Commission, I'm sure that the UK will adopt similar standard, has issued recently a taxonomy proposal where you can define what are the sustainable sectors, basically. So that's first important to have the right definition. And then what we are doing with the European Banking Federation, the IIF, is to make sure that on the bank balance sheet, with this sustainable sector, you can measure what has been the action of the bank so that we can see if the bank is doing the right thing and financing the right sectors. Without doing that, it's difficult. But measuring is a bit complex because you need to know exactly what is the carbon content, if you want, of a loan. But we are working with academics and we'll make a proposal soon.
The Bank of England, I think, stress tests their banks on climate change. Should we do the same in Europe?
We should do the same. And it's not only about doing the right thing, but it's also looking at the risk. Because, the risks are here every day, probably more for insurance companies now, which can see, for instance, with storm, hurricane, fire, more impact than the banks. But you can have the same impact for the banks soon.
What kind of leader are you? Bank leader. How do you lead?
Mm-hmm. I'm a former paratrooper, so I jumped with the team. And with the team at Unicredit, we did many difficult things and we took a lot of decisive action. We raised a very large amount of capital. We sold a very large amount of non-performing loan, almost 50 billion. And we increased massively the profitability of the bank, more than double the return on equity. But first of all, I think as a leader, I say what I do and I do what I say. With our clients, with our team members and with our shareholders.
But when do you involve others in the decision making, right? So you were a paratrooper, do you have consensus and then you say let's go for it, or do you make a decision and then convince the others that this is the right idea?
It's very important to listen to the team members, and what I do is I ask them to speak. Even the young people and the young team members in a meeting, to listen to their view, encourage them to speak, and encourage them to disagree with me. They might disagree, but I might disagree with them, and then I decide. But I think having different views is very important. If you're just within your certainty and you don't have contradiction, you make mistakes. So it's important to listen, but it's important to decide as well. And from time to time, it is not a consensus.
But how difficult is it to find talent, retain talent, and grow talent?
We have in Unicredit an unbelievable number of very talented people. And, people are talented by nature. What is important is to grow their talent and their ability to flourish within an organization. And so you need to give them confidence. You need to give them a sense that what they do is the right thing. And to attract people, we need to be seen as doing the right thing in terms of behavior, but also in terms of action. I did something in the bank to do that, which might be seen as a detail, but which for me is very important. We developed what we call social banking initiative. And when we engage with our team members, when they extend a loan to a micro entrepreneur who will never access the banking market, but because we have a social loan, which is very special, we can lend them money, even if they could not do before, or to social entrepreneur, our team members feel good. The first time I financed a social enterprise, it was a school, actually, in London. And when I went to the school and I saw the children there, I almost cried. Because as a banker, you never see what you do when you build up, the loans. And there I saw that, I was doing something right. And I felt it's important to pass this message to our team members, you're doing the right thing.
What kind of advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
I would give an advice which is do what you want to do. Just have pleasure and fun in what you do. Don't think about a career plan. Don't think about the future. Just learn, and when you feel comfortable, just try to learn something else. Go always beyond your comfort zone. And when you do that, you become a better person and a better banker.
Is that what you learned as a paratrooper? Do you think back at those days? Were you ever a legionnaire?
Yeah, I was a paratrooper when I was 20 years old, yes. So,
and you think of that, and is there anything that you remember learning back then that you apply now to your job?
Yes, it's to work with a team And it's as well to make sure that nothing is impossible, because when you jump out of a plane at 4,000 meters, you feel it's a little bit difficult, but nothing is impossible. And if you're alone in the plane, it's very difficult. When you're with a group of colleagues or crew members, it is much easier. So you learn that it's much easier when you work at a team to do more difficult things.
Do you ever feel like an outsider being a Frenchman in charge of an Italian bank?
Well, I am Italian by heart, so I'm almost Italian. No, not at all. I think our bank is actually a pan-European bank. We have half of our activity in Italy, but 30% in Germany, in Austria, and in Central and Eastern Europe. The language in the bank is broken English. Broken because none of us speak proper English. You can see that with my accent, which is a little bit French. But, and we communicate in English, and we feel that we are part of Unicredit, which is our home.
So you have a corporate mascot, Elket. She's never far away from you. What was the idea behind it, and what has it achieved?
Well, Elket is an important mascot because it's what we call in Italian the porta fortuna. So she brings good luck, which, you always need luck from time to time. And it was the code name of our capital increase. The bankers came and had like Star Wars, Dark, whatever. Said, no, let's take a name that nobody will understand. And one of my colleagues advising us from Sweden and had a little elk. So we say, we are going to call the plan Elket. So she became the mascot of the bank. And, she's important for everybody because she said that we do important things, but we don't take ourselves seriously. Let me give you a small episode. 6 months ago, I received a mail from one of our cashiers in Puglia. Said, can I send you a picture? I never met her. And I said, of course you can send me a picture. And she sent me a picture of a small Elket she had, because we made small Elkets we give to the team members. And she knitted a red jumper for the Elket, because red is the color of the bank. She gave me the energy and the strength to work with the client every day. I was really touched, actually. So you can see that Elket is helping everybody in the bank. That's really cool.
I feel like we should have her on set, actually.
Elket is here.
She's never far away.
She's never far away, absolutely. But you have a cousin of Elket, I think.
Oh, we do have a cousin of Elket. Yes. Do people really talk about her?
Yes, they do. I mean, she has her site, and I give Elkets to all my clients when they come and visit me. They actually ask for Elkets now.
On a really bad day, what do you think about? Is there a motto that you have, or is there something you think about? Maybe an advice that someone gave to you in previously that you kind of bring with you?
Well, on a really bad day, I think that it can only improve, actually. And you have always to look at the positive side of things, basically. As a Frenchman, the glass is always half full, never half empty.
Really?
Yes, absolutely. And we put a little bit more wine to make sure that it can be full, yes.
Is there anything...
the difference between an optimist and a pessimist. They all die, but one has a much better life than the other one. So I want to be an optimist.
Is there anything that leaders, chief executives can teach politicians? And is there anything that politicians can teach chief executives?
Bankers need to remain in their place, basically. We're here to finance the economy. We are not here to have a view about what can be done. To be a politician is much, much more difficult than being a banker. Our business and our job as bankers is relatively simple, basically. To be politicians, to think about the future of a country, to take the right actions is super complex.
I was going to ask you, if I speak to you again in 5 years, where will you be?
At Unicredit, making sure that Unicredit is a true pan-European winner.
Jean-Pierre Mustier, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.